During the 1950s, learning to tie your shoes was a rite of passage. This was a time before Velcro, and lacing up your shoes and tying a bow was standard practice before heading off to your first day of grade school. Buckles were also popular ways to fasten shoes, so young children learned early how to take care of both. With the help of parents and older siblings, along with a lot of practice, kids gained a bit more independence by tackling this task themselves. Many families during the 1950s were limited in what they could store in their freezer. Therefore, ice cream was relegated to special deliveries by the Good Humor Man. These visits delivered ice cream on a stick to kids during the hot summer months, and the neighborhood would gather just at the sound of the jingle heard coming down the street. That sound alone had kids calling time out during a game, and saw kids of all ages digging the change out of their pockets for a Good Humor bar. Remember spending the entire day outside playing? If so, then you might also remember that you had specially designated clothes you wore to play outside. These play clothes were the ones that Mom didn't mind you getting dirty in. Usually, these clothes would work their way down from Sunday school clothes to becoming school clothes, and finally they would get a last chance at life as play clothes. By the time they reached play clothes status, they were good and worn in, maybe even having a hole or two, but they were perfect for a bike trip around the neighborhood or a good game of stickball. During the early 1950s, having the first television on the block brought all the neighbors over to see it in action. For some, watching Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953 might be their first television memory. Or maybe the memories of Dad up on the roof adjusting the antenna while Mom monitored the fuzziness and called out directions through the window is what you remember most. Either way, the arrival of your very first television set was a monumental moment for parents and kids alike. One of the most popular TV shows from that era was The Roy Rogers Show. The show led to comic books, costumes, toy pistols, and other merchandise that made kids super fans. Every kid wanted to be Roy, and they loved dressing up as him to play with a slingshot or a realistic toy cap gun. The toy guns could be loaded with a roll of caps that made a realistic bang and let off a distinct smelling gun smoke that made every kid feel like a real cowboy. Automobiles in the 50s were spacious, and the large bench-style seats gave you plenty of room to move around, especially since cars didn't come equipped with seat belts. The car culture that was created in the 1950s became iconic in every aspect. From drive-in burger joints to the drive-in movie, the ultimate feeling of freedom was found behind the wheel of a car. One other thing you might remember is stopping by your local filling station to have the attendant fill up the gas tank with leaded gas, and at the time, it only cost around 13 cents per gallon. Were some of your best memories spent with your dad? Maybe you enjoyed setting up a Lionel train set and doing some model railroading. The trips with him to the hobby shop on a Saturday morning were always exciting. Between the model railroad miniatures, the balsa wood airplanes, and the model kits, those trips were always special. If you grew up during the 1950s, you most likely watched Davy Crockett during a 5-part series that aired on ABC. Disney produced the story of the real-life frontiersman, which starred Fess Parker. This broadcast was so popular that merchandising went through the roof. Every kid wanted a coonskin cap and would go out exploring their neighborhood. The coonskin cap would go on to become an iconic part of life during the 1950s. Family time was an important part of life during this decade. If families weren't watching their new television, they could be found playing popular board games of the time. The Game of Life, Scrabble, and Yahtzee were among the favorites, and these games provided quality family time together. This was, of course, a time before television offered hundreds of channels, and electronics consumed everyone's attention. Family game nights were usually a standard tradition that took up an entire evening and brought everyone together. You might also remember a toy called Zip the Monkey. Zip was plush with a rubber face, ears, and hands. He wore a yellow shirt that read Zip on the front, red corduroy pants with suspenders, a red hat, and white rubber shoes. This monkey became everyone's favorite plush toy after the children's show Howdy Doody introduced the real-life Zippy the Chimp to the world. On rainy days, the 50s were made for comics, and 3D comics were all the rage. Your favorite superhero or cartoon character now jumped off the page when you slipped on the glasses that came with the comic. 3D comics flooded the market after the success of the 3D Mighty Mouse comic. This fad lasted for just a short time because the novelty of 3D began to wear off, and readers started questioning the lack of storylines. The boys may have had Davy Crockett, but young girls during the 1950s were first introduced to the characters of Cinderella and Prince Charming. Disney released the movie in 1950, and the popular fairy tale resonated with young girls around the world. CBS even released a television version starring Julie Andrews that attracted the largest TV audience ever. The idea of a girl meeting her prince and living happily ever after became the ultimate dream, and the optimistic decade that was the 1950s was the perfect time to capitalize on such a story. Saddle shoes became a must-have in any girl's wardrobe during the 1950s. These classic leather shoes looked good with either a skirt or jeans, but it was a chore to keep them clean and polished. Nothing went better with a pair of polished saddle shoes than a pair of bright white bobby socks that folded at the ankle. The 50s were the pinnacle for this footwear, and seeing a pair of these shoes can immediately transport you back to that time. If you enjoyed this video, click on this playlist to watch even more. And as always, thank you so much for watching.